Welcome to your Aged Care Compass podcast. Join us to find out how to support your older loved ones at home. We're going to help you make sense of Australia's aged care system. We talk about legal and financial considerations for ageing and how chronic health conditions impact your older loved ones' well-being. And we share real-life stories of where it went wrong for people and how we got them back on track.
Hi everyone. It's great to have you back for our next episode of your Aged Care Compass. I'm Michelle, and today Coral and I are talking about how you're assessed for in-home support and services. Coral, the changes under support at home impact on every aspect of in-home support, and that includes how people are assessed for the support they need. It's essential that people understand how they are assessed, so they can get all their information across when they speak with My Aged Care and the assessment workforce. We talk about this a lot because we see so many people failing to provide the detail needed to ensure they are approved for the right level of support. So it's timely we talk about how assessments have changed since July last year.
Hi listeners, I'm Coral. And it's great to be back with you today to discuss why it's essential that you know what to expect at every interaction you have with any aged care teams, including My Aged Care, so that you get the support that you need, as Shell said. As a former ACAT assessor, this topic is really close to my heart and something that I feel very strongly about because we see too many people not being approved for the level of support that they need.
Yep. Coral, we've previously spoken about the establishment of the single assessment system, which now brings both non-clinical and clinical assessors together as single assessment organisations. What is probably less well known is the change in the screening tool that assessors use. This was implemented in July 2024. This screening tool is called the Integrated Assessment Tool, or the IAT. It replaced the National Screening and Assessment Form, or the NSAF. Coral, can you tell us a bit more about the IAT?
Sure, Shell. Yeah, look, the IAT is what we call a dynamic tool. So what this means is depending on how you answer some of the base questions, and they're the questions that all the assessors ask, non-clinical or clinical assessors, you may trigger the tool to open further questions so that the assessor can do like a deeper dive into the particular area of need within that assessment. So how you answer these questions may also mean changing from a home support assessment, which are the non-clinical assessors, to a comprehensive assessment, which are the clinical assessors. Previously, we referred to these as the ACATs.
Coral, what are the benefits of assessments being completed using the IAT?
The benefits are that the assessments now are standardised for everyone, for every assessor in any assessment team. The information in the IAT, as we just said, it's a dynamic tool. So the information is pre-populated so that people don't have to retell their story every time they speak to an assessor. And also within this tool there's an algorithm that determines what sort of care or what level of support the person might be eligible. So in theory, this tool that takes previous information and builds on the person's story as it previously was is supposed to make the flow better with the assessments, and that if you think that people aren't going to get the same person assessing them every time their needs change. But within that document, if a person needs a support plan review, they can go in and see the information that happened on the previous assessment and have a very clear understanding of how that person was maybe 12 months ago, and then not have to take the person through all those questions again, but really hone in on what has changed since that previous assessment. The idea is it's going to make it, I guess, easier for people and not having to retell their story over and over again.
Yep. Okay. And in your opinion, what are some of the concerns you have about this tool?
Well, my concerns, I always have concerns around assessments and people not really understanding how important it is to convey in detail what their needs are and why they can't, manage their activities of daily living. So even previously when assessment teams were using the NSAF, sure, I had concerns there that people, and people quite rightly should believe that the system is quite intuitive and will give them the kind of support that they need. And it will, but it comes back to the person knowing that they have to get all that information across in such detail. So I guess my concern is probably the same now as it might have been 12 months ago, that if you don't get all that information across, you might miss out on the services and support that you need. And particularly, I think, with the IAT and the single assessment service is that these assessment workforces are having to get through. They've got their KPIs that they have to meet. They are having to get through a lot of assessments every day and every week. So there's less opportunity for people to go back to the assessor afterwards and say, actually, no, mum wasn't telling the story as it is in reality. This is what's going on. It will actually be too late. That file will have been closed, the approvals will have been given, and the assessor will just not be receptive to adjusting their approvals after the fact.
And Coral, it also comes down to their workload. They really don't have time, do they?
They do not have time. No, that's right.
So, Coral, who is using the new tool, the IAT?
All the assessors, Shell. So whether they're non-clinical, and these are the people who are still assessing for entry-level support under the Commonwealth Home Support Program, and this is called a home support assessment.
Yep.
And then, of course, the clinical assessors, or people know this as the ACATs. So they are also using the tool. And then the call centre, My Aged Care, uses this when people make contact with My Aged Care for the first time. The foundation of that person's scenario, their file, begins with My Aged Care screening from the IAT.
Right. So important then that you get your information across whenever you talk to somebody.
Yeah. And look, the thing I always say is you get one chance at making the right impression. So I always discourage people whenever I give a presentation and I'm talking about making a referral to My Aged Care, I say, don't go home and pick up the phone and call My Aged Care. You really need to take some time to think about what you need, reflect on who are the people that might already be supporting you, and actually write a list so that when you are ready and you could call My Aged Care, you have all the detail written down in front of you so you don't forget in that moment where you're having that discussion with My Aged Care.
Yep. Coral, what sorts of areas does the IAT cover?
Well, it covers 3 parts, Shell. It's the triage, which is the initial, I guess, screening and determining if a person kind of starts to paint a picture of what the person's level of support might be, and also the urgency as to when that assessment should occur.
Yep.
It also covers, obviously, the assessment, which is probably the biggest component of this. And then, of course, it will generate the support plan, which is a summary of what the person's needs are and all their approvals.
Right.
Triage is a fairly new concept within this, and it needs to happen for ACATs. Previously would triage referrals when they were coming in from My Aged Care. It needs to be done within all these new workforces now, these merged non-clinical and clinical workforces that were successful in the tender last year. So once your referral has been made, by My Aged Care, it will come out to one of the assessment workforces, and it might be one of the previous state-based Queensland Health, New South Wales Health, Victoria Health, one of the previous ACATs, which now has non-clinicians working within their team.
Yep.
Or it might be one of the new assessment organisations, as I just mentioned, who were successful in the tender last year. The triage delegate from whichever assessment team or workforce you go to will contact the older person or their representative to discuss that referral.
Okay.
It includes the reason for assessment. The discussion will talk about any existing support that they have, the older person's health and functional ability, and their general well-being and safety.
Right.
Based on this interaction, the triage delegate will determine what type of assessment the older person will receive and what priority. So one thing we see all the time across social media is, and people saying it as well, and people, they call us up and they talk about, I rang My Aged Care and asked for an ACAT assessment.
Yes.
You can't actually do that. You can't call up and stipulate what kind of assessment you want. The kind of assessment that you will receive comes down to how you convey what your needs are and the urgency for that. So at triage, the triage delegate will contact the older person or the representative, have a talk about what their needs might be, what the caring situation looks like if the carer is at a point of sort of carer crisis and can't sustain that caring role anymore. That really pushes people into more of a high priority so that their assessment would happen sooner rather than later. And we know that around the country, it's anywhere from 6 to 9 months for many of the assessments to happen. If your needs are very urgent, you can get assessed a lot quicker than that. In fact, I just heard back from one of our clients' sons last week. This was it was actually a crisis situation with this family, and we supported the family to get comprehensive assessment, and the older person was assessed 2 weeks after we triggered that referral to My Aged Care. So based on your need, if your need is urgent and high and there is a risk of the older person perhaps ending up in hospital because the carer can't provide the care anymore, you can get assessed a lot sooner.
Yeah.
From there, then we go into assessment, which this is big.
It's
a
big.
big topic. So
Yes.
the assessment covers the actual reason for assessment, much the same as why you would trigger a referral to My Aged Care in the first instance.
Yep.
It does cover the carer profile, as I've just touched on. It covers the person's functional ability, physical, personal health, frailty, the social situation. There's a section there that is concerned with cognition, behaviour, and psychological needs. And it also considers financial and legal aspects. So it really covers the whole situation that the older person is experiencing, and also their carer or their family support as well.
Yep.
From there, the support plan is generated, and this, as I mentioned earlier, is like a summary of the assessment. So it's got descriptive content in there, and then it will also include the person's unmet needs and their goals and their recommendations.
Right. That's a lot to cover. So, Coral, how can the assessments be done?
In a perfect world, Shell, assessments are supposed to be done face-to-face. That's best practice. But
Yep.
in reality, it's not always possible. It's certainly in regional or rural or remote locations. It's just not possible for assessors to be driving 2 hours one way to do an assessment. They just don't have the time to do this. So assessors can actually do the assessment over the phone. It's really important for people to understand this because face-to-face gives the assessor the opportunity to really see what's going on in a person's home.
Yeah.
A phone assessment may not capture the true picture of what's going on. And so then I guess the onus is even more on the older person and their family to be able to articulate exactly what's going on because the assessor doesn't have the benefit of being there in person. So, yep, face-to-face is ideal, but the reality is that is not going to happen for everybody. So it might be a phone call.
Okay. And where can the assessment be done?
Look, I think the assessments should be done in the person's home. That's best practice. I remember when I was an ACAT assessor, the moment I'd arrive at a person's home and the moment they opened the door, I was in assessment mode. I was looking past the older person or the adult child who might have opened the door. I walked in and I'm looking around. I'm looking at, is there any food left on the bench? How clean is the house? Is it squalid? Is there an odor of urine? Like before you even start asking the older person, you're already getting a sense of what's going on. So in a perfect world, the assessment should be done in the person's home, but honestly, it can be done anywhere. So if the older person, let's say, for instance, and drawing on some clients, they might come and stay with their family for a bit of a holiday and then they might have a fall and need some help. The assessment can be done at a location that's not their home. They might be staying with family for a short period of time for whatever reason. Assessments can be done in any community setting, maybe a GP clinic. Again, it's not ideal. And I always encourage people when they're going to have an assessment to be at their own home because the assessor will get a lot more information.
Yep.
Assessments can be done in hospital, private hospitals, public hospitals, usually. And just making a point here, with the new assessment workforces that were successful in the tender, they will not be doing assessments in hospital. The state-based ACATs, so Queensland Health ACAT teams, New South Wales Health, Victoria Health, all those state-based and funded ACATs will be the only workforce that is assessing in hospitals. So that's not changing from previous. And anywhere else that older person might be, they can be assessed anywhere. People just going back to having assessment done in hospital, you might get very lucky, but honestly, people are not supposed to be assessed for in-home support whilst they're in hospital.
Yes.
So if they're going to be getting assessed in hospital, it would be either for the transition care program, which we are not touching on today because that does not come under support at home. Or the reason that they will get assessed in hospital is if they're moving directly to residential care. So again, we see this misunderstanding across social media that if you're in hospital and talk to the social worker, they can get you an assessment sooner. It actually doesn't work like that. If you can wrangle the system like that and it would be a state-based ACAT. It's not going to be APM or Centre Care or any of the other ACNA. They are not going to be coming into the hospital and assessing you in hospital. You will not get approval for a home care package if you're in hospital because, that hospital presentation, we as clinicians, we recognise that people will go home and there'll be a recuperation, a recovery, and it's ideal to assess people after they've had that acute health episode when they're more stable to determine what their needs are.
Yep. FlexiCare is a not-for-profit organisation which supports older people living in Brisbane's southern suburbs to live their best lives in their own homes and communities. FlexiCare don't have grand plans to be the biggest aged care provider. They want to be known for treating each one of their participants as an individual who they get to know well. They answer their phone calls personally when clients ring them. They give their clients easy access to a home care partner who can work with them to deliver the best mix of support possible. If you're in Brisbane South and want to know more, give their friendly team a call on 07 3422 8400 or check out their website flexi.org.au. So, along the same lines, Coral, who can provide information at assessment?
Well, really anyone that is involved with the older person. So obviously the older person, the client themselves, will be providing information. And then we always encourage to have a family member, if possible, or a spouse, if they have a spouse, just to make sure that all bases are covered, that all of the information is getting across. And we often see that the older person will tell their story in a certain way, but the adult child, son or daughter, will often say, that's not quite right, Mum. What about this? So again, going back to what I said earlier about getting one chance to get it right, we encourage someone there that knows the older person well who can contribute to the assessment. The GP can certainly contribute. A service provider can also be part of the assessment. Any healthcare professional, Aboriginal liaison officer, care finders, anyone really who's involved with the person's care and knows the person quite well can be part of that assessment process.
Okay. Coral, one of the things I've noticed, and it comes up at triage as well as during the assessment, is asking the person the reason for the assessment. Now, I think this is a pretty crucial area to explore properly. And why I'm saying this is we've had people say to us, if we say, why do you think you need an assessment? And they go, oh, my daughter told me to. I don't think that's going to help the older person get the help they need.
No, it's not. In fact, I would actually say, well, it's not worth your while proceeding with this if you don't understand what this process means. You're not going to get the support that possibly you actually need. So the reasons that people give also reflect the screening that's done within My Aged Care. So this part of the process considers if people have had a recent hospital admission. It also considers falls, which is kind of a big thing in keeping people well and able at home. If someone is continually falling and perhaps ending up in hospital, that's like a big red flag. So that needs to be conveyed at every conversation. People's medical conditions. Now, this is one thing that we find people don't talk about. And when we say, think about what you're struggling with day to day, what you can't do for yourself. People can generally articulate that, but then we say to them, why can't you do that? And I think this is a really important point to get across is the IAT has the opportunity to collect a lot of good clinical information that will inform the kind of approvals, the kind of services or support that people will be entitled to. So it's not just about what you can't do, but why you can't do it. And that could be you might have arthritis and you can't lift a heavy saucepan in the kitchen, or the frying pan, or the casserole dish might be too heavy for you to lift, so you don't bother cooking anymore. People who might have diabetes and might have developed peripheral neuropathy, who don't wear appropriate kind of footwear, might be walking around the garden and step on a thorn or a stone and develop a wound on their foot. And because that's so painful and taking a long time to heal, they're not able to mobilise as well. So people really need to look at not just what they can't do, but the reason why. Lawn mowing or yard maintenance is a big one. And people say, oh, I can't do that. And then we always say, well, why can't you? And we look at things like respiratory disease or cardiac history, where people are just even falls risks. I mean, someone that is prone to falling probably shouldn't be out pushing the mower around the yard. So looking at the reasons why people can't do anything, because as we talked about earlier, when people are being screened and they're answering all those base questions, having these kind of conversations around why you can't actually do something can open up the next section in the IOT that will indicate that a clinician should be involved for this assessment. So they should be getting comprehensively assessed.
Right.
Another big one is change in caring arrangements. That's really important to get across. Change in living arrangements. If people are at risk of becoming homeless, it's huge. We don't want any older people becoming homeless. We don't want them ending up in hospital because they become homeless. So that's certainly one of the reasons why you would call My Aged Care and start this process if the person can't continue to live in the place that they currently do. Cognitive status is huge as well. Mental health, social isolation and loneliness. These are all the options that you're given when you make that referral to My Aged Care. So, and there's a lot there. And people might have more than one of these points. So again, reflecting on all of your needs and why you can't do things and what's going on in your environment. Is your family moving away and can't continue to provide that support? Like that's like a change in the caring arrangement, or perhaps that might be a change in the living arrangement if you lived under the same roof as them and they were moving into state. So really reflecting on your needs and being clear about why you would need formal support under My Aged Care.
Right. Coral, I noticed there are questions relating to people's support or care network. One thing I'm pleased to see is that the assessment now considers the stress that carers may be experiencing in providing support for the older person.
It's always been really important, Shell, and it's no less important now, but there's the opportunity now for that to be captured and I mean, perhaps it wasn't captured before because the NSAF didn't focus a lot on that aspect, whereas the IAT now is actually asking about that. So any assessor should be tuning into what the caring arrangements are and the level of carer stress, or if it's hit that point where it's a carer crisis and the carer is saying, no, I just can't do this anymore, and it's actually affecting them and their health. So wonderful that this is being captured, because carer stress is certainly adding to that vulnerability for that older person.
Yep. Coral, the older person's functional ability is considered. What sorts of things are the assessors looking for?
They're looking for a lot, Shell. They're looking basically at what the older person can do and can't do for themselves, or what's challenging them. What are they struggling with? So it might be something so obvious as their ability to walk, their ability to mobilise. And when we look at that, how far could they walk? Can they actually get to the letterbox out the front? Can they walk 10 metres without being fatigued? Could they walk around the block? Could they go to the shopping centre and walk from one end to the other, or not, and having to take a rest, or sit on their four-wheelie walker, as we hear, getting from one end of the shops to the other? It's their ability to climb stairs. You know, a lot of people won't even think about that because they'll either avoid the stairs or they'll take the lift. It talks about wheelchair mobility. If a person might be mobilising with their four-wheelie walker at home, but going out into the community, that's just not possible. So they need someone to accompany them, and they need to be in a wheelchair for community access. It will consider their ability to drive and whether they need assistance with transport. It talks about there are questions around accessing the community. We know that when
Yep.
people are at home, their houses might be internally level, but when they go out to the GP practice, they're going to be walking on a lot of uneven surfaces and up and down gutters. And do people need someone to accompany them to those kind of appointments because the ground is uneven out in the community? It will consider, can they do light housework? Can they do moderate to heavy housework? So again, that detail coming into the assessment about, can they wipe down a kitchen bench? Maybe they can, but they actually can't vacuum the floor or mop the floor or
Yep.
make the bed. It's their ability to attend to personal care, like having a bath or a shower. Do people avoid that because they are too afraid that they might have a fall in the shower? Will they only have a shower if there's someone else in the house at that time?
Yep.
It's their ability to get dressed. Do they need some assistance with doing up zippers or buttons? Their ability to transfer from a chair or the bed, to get up out of bed. Do they need a bed stick to do that? If
Yep.
they are getting out of the chair, do they lean heavily on the table or because there's no armrests at the dining table, that they're leaning heavily on the table? Maybe they need a supportive chair that has armrests, so it makes it a little bit easier for them. So looking at upper and lower body strength, their endurance, their balance, their ability to prepare meals for themselves. And this is one thing that I always include in my presentations, is preparing a meal, particularly an evening meal, is not putting a piece of toast in the toaster. That a piece of toast is not a meal. A meal, we're talking about cooking some meat and perhaps some vegetables or some pasta
Yes.
or a casserole or a curry. It's the person's ability to take their medications independently or not. Are they forgetting their medications?
Yep.
Does someone in the family call mum or dad each day to remind them to take their medications? It's their ability to handle money as well.
Yeah.
Do they just keep a few dollars in their purse for when they go out and have a coffee? Is someone in the family paying all those bills for them? The assessment also concerns a person's ability to use a telephone. Are they cognitively impaired that they can't manage the phone? Are they hearing impaired that they also struggle to use a telephone? Is it better that, someone else in the family is the point of contact because the older
Yeah.
person will not, for whatever reason, answer the phone?
Yes.
There's a whole range of things that assessors are looking for. And again, this is why it's so important that people really take the time to think about all the things that are challenging them in their activities of daily living and who might already be providing some support, to write that kind of support down, because that will inform, or that reflects what the person's level of need is.
Right. So the way the system's working now, Coral, why is it important that the person being assessed properly communicates any issues they're having with any of those functions you've mentioned?
Shell, it's always important that people communicate that information. I know I keep saying this again and again, but it really is essential. But from the 1st of July this year, when Support at Home commences, people will be approved for services within 3 categories. So the system, as it looks like with assessments from the 1st of July, will have less flexibility than it currently does, which is really important for people to understand. So from the 1st of July, the way people are assessed will inform what kind of support they will actually be approved for. So there'll be 3 categories. One will be clinical, one will be independence, and the other is everyday living. Unless they're assessed as needing services within those categories, they won't actually be eligible to receive them. And we've been talking about this with our guests over the past couple of weeks,
Yes.
in that reduced flexibility. So currently a person is assessed, a support plan is generated, that does inform the care plan that the provider drafts. There is some flexibility because when the provider is signing the person up, if a need comes up that they need some wound care, they can include nursing within that care plan. But from the 1st of July, if that information is not conveyed and the person isn't approved for services under the clinical category, they're going to miss out on getting that nursing support.
Right.
Another example is that if you have mobility impairment, maybe that might be related to pain and you don't say anything about that during the assessment, again, you may not be approved under the clinical category to receive an occupational therapy assessment or physio to help manage that pain.
Right. I know there are a multitude of questions that we haven't been able to touch on everything today that is asked in the assessment, but after all the questions have been answered, the next step is the support plan, and then so the support plan is developed. Could you talk a bit around that?
Yeah, Shell. So from the assessment, that the assessor has all the information to put together the picture of what's going on with that older person, what can they do, what can they not do for themselves, what kind of support that they need. So based on all those unmet needs and those, potential goals that the person has, the assessor will generate the support plan, and that highlights all those unmet needs. So once all the mandatory questions are completed within the assessment, an algorithm will generate the level of approval or the level of support that that person needs. It might suggest entry-level services under the Commonwealth Home Support Program, or it will recommend a level of support under the Supported Home Program.
Gosh, Coral, that is a lot to cover in an assessment.
Well, assessments are so important. I talk about assessments all the time. Your assessment sets the foundation for everything that comes after that.
Yes.
Everything that you're going to be approved for, all the support that you need is determined by your assessment. It's crucial that people get their assessments right the first time.
Yes. Coral, thank you, because your expert input is always so valuable, and we know the new assessment tool covers a lot of information. That's why it's so important to be very clear on what your needs are. We've written some blogs recently about this topic. The links to the blogs will be in the show notes. Thanks for joining us again this week, and we'll see you again next week. Until then, take care. Hey Care community, thanks for listening to this episode. So you never miss a show, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. If you'd like to know more about what we do, head to our website, cmeacn.com.au.